We are here with thanks to Energia, who are sponsoring our rugby coverage for the year ahead. And to that end, I mentioned the brilliant sports department. Two of them are here right now to help us preview the championship, where Ireland are going for 3 in a row. Will you welcome, please, Ruaidhri O'Connor, Sinead, Kissane, everybody coming out on stage. There you are. Oh, hello.
Hi, lads.
Hello.
How are you?
Hello. You're very welcome. Hello, Rory. Hello, Sinead.
Thank you.
What? We feel like gay crashes here.
Not at all.
There's,
Over to you.
oh, it's great listening.
Can I, by way of getting there, because we just didn't get time to do it when we were chatting, just very briefly to touch on the Ireland-England 1995 to 2003 Keith Wood, Martin Johnson situation. It's not great.
No.
So, 1995 England, 1996 England, 1997 England, 1998 England, 1999 England, 2000 England, 2001 Ireland.
I didn't play in that.
He didn't play in that. And I didn't play in all the other ones either, I have to say.
And then 02 and, of course, 03 England. So that was 8-1.
Yeah.
And then when you retired, Keith,
Oh, yeah, it improves.
Ireland won 4 in a row and 7 of 8.
Yeah.
On a serious note, because you retired at 31, I know your body was at you.
Yeah.
Maybe regret's not the right word, but you would be entitled to feel a little bit disappointed that even as a 36, 37-year-old, you would have been watching Ireland win a Grand Slam. That kind of nag at you, God, I'm a bit unlucky there the way my time fell.
I can say with great comfort, not a bit of it.
Right.
And it was it's very interesting. It's one of these mindset things that you have to have. All I ever wanted to do was to win. And so all you're ever trying to do is to get Ireland to win. So that's, and then you retire and they win. And I don't get any of the credit for that, nor should I. It's the guys around the field get it. But you automatically go back to the position of where you were before, is that you want Ireland to win. So Ireland are winning. And I was happy. You said you knew it was your last international game of rugby playing the final. I started against France in the quarterfinal. I didn't think it was my last game. I expected to win the game and I expected to go and play a semi-final. It was only with about 10 minutes to go in that game when I suddenly realised that's the end of it. And I'd worked really hard to get back to playing that World Cup. There was no chance of me playing any bit beyond that. I was held together with sticking tape, did everything in my power to go and play in that. My surgeon in London had just said, it's a risk worth taking for a World Cup, but your shoulder's going to go, and the next time it goes, you're going to be infirm. So I accepted that as a risk, but I wasn't going to have that as a risk going forward. So there was no ever chance of me at 34 or 35 or 36 playing. Okay. And part of the difference is now, they can play that way now, but they're playing a lot less games. They're not playing all of the games. So you'd go, you'd play 80 minutes. You were never really substituted for the most part. So I think it's possible to do now. It's absolute rare back in the day, but I never did. I got excited by the fact, and I remember the joy of looking at us finally winning things. You know, we had come from nowhere in the 90s. We really had, and we had fought really hard. And from about 2000, which links really nicely to some of our coaches, but in 2000, when we picked Strings, Raj, Simon Easterby, things started to change then because there was a new clutch of players that didn't know failure, and we did. We knew plenty of it. And so suddenly you had a group of guys that were coming in that started winning matches, suddenly had a level of confidence. And they were always going to be the guys to take it forward.
Yeah. Sinead, it's amazing where the competition is now in that if you look 91 to 07 of those 17 5 and 6 Nations championships, England and France win 14 of the 17. You just have Wales in 94 and 05 and the Scots in 2000. But like it's a carve-up between England and France. Whereas post 07, Ireland have won 6, Wales won 5, England 4, France 2. It's like this beautifully, almost unnaturally open, wonderful competition that gets us through winter. It's very nice to have it back again.
Oh, it is so nice to have it back. This really is the sweet spot, though, isn't it? just a few days before the build-up, listening to you guys. Nothing's happened yet. You don't quite know which way it's going to go. This is my favorite part. So this year's obviously going to be, Saturday. What a way to open it. It's going to be just incredible.
Yeah. Ireland going for 3 in a row, Rory? Never been done, or are we bending the rules slightly there with shared wins?
There's a couple of shared titles in the history, but no team has ever gone back to back to back, and to do it without their coach as well will be a hell of a challenge. But I've just come back from Portugal this morning where they're preparing, and it didn't really feel any difference. You do tend to get carried away on the vibes when you're around the camp like that, and I am wary of doing so, but you look at the players on the pitch warming up, the caliber of players that they have right now, the experience they have, the winning mentality that they've built over the last couple of years. And I know November was a dip, but it's hard not to come back feeling confident that they'll deliver something on Saturday, and to feel that they have, the schedule has kind of opened up nicely for them. If they can get over Saturday, it kind of rolls on from there and builds towards that round 4 game against France. So I think everyone's looking at the schedules, everyone's talking, you go to the Six Nations launch, everyone talks about momentum, all the cliches come out. It's kind of, it's like Six Nations bingo every year, but some of them are true, and I think for both teams, Saturday is the defining game of the whole thing because it all just rolls from there.
Yeah. I don't even know what I'm asking here, but it's just an observation, and it struck me even reading about your team, Martin, where it was like, we got to win Six Nations. When you won the Grand Slam in 2003, it was like a box ticked. It wasn't a euphoric, we've climbed Everest. To bluntly chart Irish rugby, 90s tough, 2000s, it's the beginnings, and this culmination, the Everest is the 2009 Grand Slam. And it was euphoric. And then there's the Joe Schmidt, Andy Farrell decade of 13 to, let's call it last year. And it's this endless, winning New Zealand for the first time, big moment. Winning South Africa first time, big moment. Grand Slams. We're ticking off all these firsts. I'm not sure there are any firsts left. Obviously, 3 in a row, it would be a big thing. But it struck me even at the finale to last year's Six Nations, the Scotland game, after England had ambushed Ireland, the Grand Slam was gone. There was a degree of no, this is exciting. We are excited. But it just is that little bit different. There's an interesting dynamic for Irish rugby now, which I suspect Martin felt. It's, unfortunately, the firsts are gone. It's now World Cup or bust. Do you get what I'm kind of talking about?
I think it is that, actually, because because we've had so many good players in the last period of time, because we've had so many good teams in the last period of time, we still haven't got past a quarterfinal of a World Cup, and that is the monkey that's on our back. So I do think there is the drive to succeed and the drive to, we're losing some of our old players. We're going to lose some of those players over the next 2 or 3 years. We need to try and get that winning element for some of the young guys to go in there so that we end up with a squad of 30 players when we get to the next World Cup, that we don't mind if one of them is gone or 2 of them are gone, that we have the capability to be able to do it. And I always look back at the South African World Cups and actually the England World Cup, where these were players that had won an awful lot, and they ended up with a squad of 30 at the end that they were comfortable about the interchangeability. I don't think that that's true even in any of the last 2 World Cups for Ireland. I think we looked really shallow with the amount of players. Okay, in my time, maybe you were doing really well to 15 players that were good enough. Now you need 30, and that's the difference. And so sometimes you kind of play one off against the other. You have to win because that's what pay all the bills. Six Nations, fantastic for that, really, really good. So that'll pay the bills for the IRFU. You need to make certain you get the win, but you also need to blood players. I just feel we're getting to the idea that we're blooding more now. It's the first time I felt it, that we're easing players in, we're getting the balance right at this stage of a cycle.
Yeah.
So I still have a huge wish and drive for Ireland to win this one, but I do think it is all on a drive to the next World Cup and having 30 players of the top quality that you have, that have played enough of rugby and have won enough of big rugby matches to be able to do it. It's very hard to sustain that for 4 years. And Jono said it at the start, they lost out on the last game of the Grand Slam for 3 years in the trot. I mean, you won a couple of those championships, but you lost the Grand Slam.
Probably looking back, doing that was probably a good thing, because we never, if we'd won them, everyone would have said you're a great team, you're the greatest team, you're fantastic, blah blah, and you can get carried away with that. We were winning 90% of our games, and the only game people would talk about was one we lost, and our own media would just kick us to death over that game. You're bottlers, you can't do it, blah 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 blah. So it was a bizarre time.
That's the interesting parallel, because the bottler term is debated about Ireland now in the World Cup quarter-final. But there's no issue. It's just a fact of life. But it strikes me as slightly less fun as a fan, almost. I get what the team are doing, but actually, I just feel 10 years ago it was like, God, can we win the Six Nations? And now it's like Grand Slam, or
Yeah, and that.
I rather this feeling.
Yeah.
And oh my God, they're shite. It's not a great feeling to have.
But sometimes you need to go back to that feeling to go, oh yeah, it is horrible. So that 03 Six Nations, to be honest, we'd just beaten, in the November we beat the All Blacks, Australia, South Africa consecutive Saturdays. And that was a big thing to beat the All Blacks. Then we had to follow up and beat Australia. And then we played pretty weak South African team, but we put 50 points on them. So we were playing well. We beat France in the opening game, wasn't great. And then I remember playing Wales away the next game. And that's when I knew I was done. Because I remember we were down in Wales getting ready to play at Cardiff for Millennium. And I had very little buzz, because I didn't feel a challenge. It was an average Welsh team. We'd just beaten, and we were flat. We went out on the field to warm up. I remember the only time probably in my career I bollocked the team coming off, because we were flat as pancakes, because it was just like another game, Wales away.
Yeah.
And they'd lost to Italy the week before. They were struggling, and they came off. They nearly scored in the first half. Well, I think we beat them by 15 points, 12, 15 points. And it was seen as a moral victory for Wales. You watch the commentary of that game, it's hilarious. It's like they've beaten us, but they've lost by 15 points at home. And it's England need to go and rethink what they're doing. Well played, Wales. They make a Welsh player man of the match. We beat. They did. They picked. It was like a fantastic performance for them in the context. 3 or 4 years later, 5 years later, it sounds ridiculous, but we didn't. We played Italy the next game. I didn't play. They played half a team. We then played Scotland at home, put 40 on them, and it was ho-hum. Yeah. And actually, that game, because it was suddenly a Grand Slam game, and all that stuff I talked about earlier, with it kicking off, made us play. We had to. I think Ireland played better in 03 when we put 40 on them than they did in 01 when they beat us, because they scored a try, or you scored a try, wasn't it? You, and held on with a bit of help from the ref. In 03, don't.
Held on for some stupidity of the English forwards who used the same lineouts that we had in the Lions that summer. We won all their lineouts.
All of the above. In 03, we really had to play.
Yeah.
And I know it turned out 40 point whatever, but it wasn't. We had to play, particularly the first half, to win that game. So you're right, and it's hard. When everyone wants to be an underdog. Everyone says, "Oh, we like." That's easy. Yeah. The mentality of the underdog is easy for everyone. When you're the top dog and everyone's looking at you, and to perform is difficult. And the All Blacks have done it historically incredibly well. And it will be a challenge for Ireland, that thing, to do it again. Yeah. And when you've done it, and hopefully England come here hungry to challenge you. I think that game last year, I didn't go in, but I was outside Twickenham when you were coming for a Grand Slam. And I'm thinking to myself, if England cannot get up for this game and perform, you're never going to get up. Someone to come and win a Grand Slam on your home stadium. And I heard the Irish anthem I was half a mile away, and I heard the Irish anthem. You had a lot of fans there, and it was big. I thought Twickenham needs that. They need a challenge. And then we did God Save the King, and that was massive. And I got a bit of a prickle. I thought, wow. I'm 53, but I was ready for that game. I was like, I could play. If you can't play in that atmosphere, yeah. And they performed. So England have got to get to a point where we can come over here. A massive challenge to win in Ireland against fantastic Irish team, you've just got to relish that and come out and really, really perform. Because I think, they got to a semi-final of the World Cup. That team that was, so they can do it, but they just seem inconsistent.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not where they need to be.
Rory, put a bow on my rather strange point, complaining about how good everything is. Where do you think the team are in terms of their entire success or failure comes down to once every 4 years? It's they're like Olympians almost, and no matter they win in South Africa, and people are like, it doesn't matter, it's not the World Cup. That's kind of thrown at them a lot.
Yeah, I think it's one of Andy Farrell's great skills that he just refuses to engage with the World Cup cycle. Obviously he's planning and he's not ignoring the fact that there is this big target in a couple of years' time. But as soon as they got back in last year, he targeted back-to-back Grand Slams. And the reason the Scotland game felt so hollow was because the goal was a Grand Slam, and England derailed that with that Marcus Smith drop goal. And if you get to the level where you've won a Grand Slam, a championship just doesn't live up to the hype. And Ty Burns said it yesterday in Portugal. They're going for the Slam again this year. Three-peat is nice, that they want to do it, but they judge themselves off their own standards over the last couple of years, and their standard is a team that can go and win a Grand Slam. Farrell is very, very good at reframing each window. I think one of the areas they struggled in November is that they couldn't really find a why for these 4 individual games against teams they'd already beaten. I know New Zealand was a revenge mission, but they struggled a little bit mentally with that, whereas I think they've learned from that a bit this time, and the goal is there for them. And while we talk about World Cup cycles, it's really important not to diminish the importance of the Six Nations and winning this brilliant competition. It may come around every year, but every year it's special. We haven't got to a point yet where winning it isn't special. We can't take that for granted. Yes, we've had incredible success, but we've lived through long years of lean years. So I think to get carried away and start blooding too many young players, Eddie Jones made that mistake, and it backfired badly.
Yeah.
And he really does set a tone, Andy Farrell. I remember last year we were at the launch of the Guinness Six Nations, and everybody was still talking about the World Cup hangover, everything. And Andy Farrell just sat at the top table, and he was like, "I'm over the World Cup." We've moved on. And I remember me, even as a journalist watching, I was like, oh, so am I. Just that, the way he's able just to set a tone. And that was him just saying it in a press conference. You can only imagine what it's like behind the scenes. And, so he really is good at that. And I think we'd probably miss, so it is going to be interesting to see just how Ireland, go without him, obviously, in the Six Nations.
It's been a week where there's been a lot of talk about the future of the Six Nations. This is the last year of the current broadcast deal, and so TNT are interested. And this does tend to come up every 3-4 years. 4 years ago, there was a lot of talk of Apple and Amazon and the streaming services and endless money. And once again, free to air, same BBC, ITV. I know, Martin, you're on the BBC coverage. Rugby, the viewing figures are huge in this country, and they're huge in the UK as well. It's kind of striking. Netflix have said full contact, thanks, but no thanks. How damaging do you think it would be to rugby in the country if it went subscription, went beyond free to air?
Oh, I think it'd be unbelievably damaging. I mean, a lot of my friends, the only time they watch rugby is the Six Nations. They don't watch Heineken Champions Cup or URC. It is just the Six Nations. So you will absolutely lose that floating viewer. I mean, if you don't have that floating viewer, you will miss out on so much. It's just that shared experience that you have when it is on free to air. And it would be just massively damaging. We've seen it happen to other sports once it gets off on free to air, and it would be hugely damaging, definitely.
Does the game just need the money though, Martin? Is that the issue?
Well, yeah, but it's short-term thinking, isn't it? Because you're exactly the same. I've got friends who are sporty to a degree, some of them, but they'll all watch the Six Nations. It's part of the furniture. Ever since, the game's always been, let's move it to the end of the season. That was always a thing. And the TV people went, no. That sits where it sits because it's great for winter. There's loads of stuff going on April, May, February, March now, Six Nations. And I've got friends exactly the same. They'll watch it. And there'll be big viewing figures in the UK, 10 million people watching games. They won't pay for it. They'll just go, is it the Six Nations? Well, that's a pity. And they'll get on with their lives, and they'll lose that. But you lose those kids. And I grew up watching. It's the first rugby you ever watch. That's iconic. Me watching 70s, those colours. The lads coming out and battering each other. And apart from anything, we don't play each other. England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. We don't play each other at any sports. We need to smash each other about a bit. Otherwise, we need that release. Otherwise, things might get serious and you start invading again. Scots start marching down them. A1, people love it because, I'll be walking down the street and suddenly someone's, we lose to Scotland in 2000. Some guy's given me a bit of, I didn't know he was Scottish till they've won a game. They won game a decade that they used to win. Now they're winning every year. But it's great. We love it. That's what sport's about, that competition and banter. Yeah. And for it to be on, that would be a disaster.
Do you think the writing's on the wall? You have a good sense of these things.
Yeah, I'm hoping rugby resist it. And I remember going back 20 years, the BBC did a survey, which I got my hands on, which is kind of cool. But they moved from BBC Two to BBC One. And in so doing it, because one is when you turn on the telly, one comes up first in the old tellies anyway. That was an extra 1 million viewers. And when you think about that, so that's moving it to something that is more accessible to more people in that it's turned on first. These are passing fans of whatever's on the telly almost. But an extra 1 million viewers get to see it. That has an influence on an extra 1 million people. If you bring it down to a streaming service, you're putting it behind a paywall. And yes, lots of people have it here. Actually, far more people have it in Ireland than they have in the UK. And the viewers on any sort of sport in Ireland is still higher than anywhere else on the UK. But the numbers just go straight down to the floor. And we've seen it in cricket. We've seen it in some of the GAA and the GAA Go, that the numbers aren't quite what they were. When you put it behind something else, when you make it more awkward, people want things that are a bit easy, right, and accessible. When you make it more awkward, the grassroots suffer more. And grassroots are still suffering in rugby, and that's something that has to be rectified over time because it is being marginalised and left behind quite a lot. But you want to have as many people watching as you can. It'll become a fight. The reason it's BBC and ITV was they were able to share some of the pain of having to pay for it. And you have to figure out where this stands. And actually, John, I haven't heard that one line of we have to see our countries playing against each other and having this constant thing. It is something that everybody goes up for. It rejuvenates the city in the end of winter and the start of spring. All the cities get a huge boost. It is something that's incredibly valuable to the countries themselves. And you just can't just put it down to just being a sporting event. It's a cultural event as well. So I do think it's something that's too big to be kind of glossed over, and it would go to a pay-per-view. But rugby makes some fairly unusual decisions. So I wouldn't be holding my breath for all of it, but there's a belief that it's going to stand another 4 years on terrestrial TV, and that's essential. But there needs to be some combined thinking for that to be able to be sustainable going forward.
Okay, we'll watch that space. Rory, you were out in Portugal with the team. Simon Easterby, we talked about it on a podcast last week. He made his debut in that famous game in 2000. He's been part of the coaching ticket for a decade. He has 65 Ireland caps. He's been on the 05 Lions tour. He went out, and he's not like a household face name. I think for a lot of the million that will watch. How has he performed? What struck you about Easterby over the last week?
Yeah, I think that suits him, though. I don't think he seeks the limelight. He's as a player, Keith would know, he played with him. He was diligent, hardworking, ultra professional, and really consistent. And he has built a coaching career through earning the respect of his players rather than building a profile externally. And he played his whole career outside of Ireland, which probably hurts his profile. And he didn't have a base of Munster fans kind of trying to get him into the team, or a base of Leinster fans, Ulster fans. And yet he was still picked consistently by Eddie O'Sullivan throughout his time in Anwar and Gatlin before him. So he has earned respect within the game, and as an assistant coach with Ireland, he is incredibly popular and respected. But it is a different challenge for him, and certainly when he stepped out in front of the cameras at the launch last week, he performed well, as much as anyone thinks it matters to perform well in front of the cameras. But in terms of presenting a face for the team, in terms of answering questions, taking on the issues around the out-half selection, all that sort of stuff, he's very comfortable in that, in his own skin. But the proof will be in the pudding, because he has been Joe Schmidt's assistant. He's been Andy Farrell's assistant. He's learned from them. I'm sure he has his own ideas, but I don't know how much he's going to have license to implement them really, because this remains Andy Farrell's team. I've seen it said that Andy Farrell will be dialing into meetings. That's not happening. He may be on the end of a line if they have a bit of advice. I'd say he has an influence on selection. They're not going to drop Caelan Doris, and Andy finds out about it when we all find out about it. That sort of thing is not going to happen. But Andy Farrell isn't in the coaching box. He's not making in-game decisions. He's not getting messages on. He's not in training. So it's going to be a massive step up for him. But strikes me that it hasn't knocked that out of him. He looked very comfortable during the week, and the team looked very confident, despite the fact that their alpha leader isn't there.
You were a teammate of his, or he was a teammate of yours for 3 years? He was young then, obviously.
He was. I think there was an anti-English sentiment against him and his brother when they joined at the time. It was they're Yorkshiremen, and their mother's Irish, and they came over. I don't think they were loved by the fans. They were absolutely loved by the team and their teammates. They were and he's actually quite stern looking now. It's quite interesting to see. He is. And actually, even what you said there, he was very consistent and he was diligent and all that, and that's kind of faint praise. He was a fantastic player. He gave us a sense of discipline in the back of the line-out that we hadn't had for a while. It made my life so much easier. He could catch anything I threw at him, which was saying something. But he was fun, really hard-working, great crack off the field, incredibly focused on. You suddenly got, and this is an extra voice. Sometimes it's good to have a different voice, different type of voice. He was a leader almost immediately. He wouldn't have said he was, but he was.
Right.
And he really wanted to coach, and he was coaching before he finished. And so it's for me, it's a natural progression to it. I'm kind of really interested to see where he goes next, if he goes anywhere, or whether he takes over a role or whatever it is that happens, because he's been in this role as an assistant coach for a long time. He's never spoken about, but he's always there. And he's always been part of an incredibly high-functioning unit. So, look, I hope he's given his head a little, that Andy Farrell isn't leaning in on him too much, but I don't think that that's Andy Farrell's way anyway. So, look, I hope he blossoms with it. I hope we see things that are a bit different. I hope there's a tiny bit different from some of Andy Farrell's stuff, because you need to change all the time. It can't just be very consistent, because people find you out after a period of time. And actually, when you look at the team that England have picked, they're trying to disturb how Ireland have played in the past. So I hope that we've enough of change that's come in on it. It's very hard to make that change that quickly, Mike.
Sure. Well, let's pick up on that point in a second. In the white corner is Steve Borthwick, former teammate of yours, and then you made him captain as well when you were the coach. So clearly you hold him in high esteem. Tell us about Borthwick. I struggle to get a feel for him based on his public utterances.
That's probably Steve. Yeah, he's intense. He's very, very thorough. Yeah, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, isn't it, with England at the moment? There's been some, I say, getting to a World Cup semi-final, and nearly getting through that. And then there's been some less performances. I think the autumn, the Australia loss was pretty damaging for the team. I think everyone expected to win that game. They could have beaten the All Blacks at the end of that. Maybe should have beaten them at the end of that game. Then lose to Australia. Okay, and we can lose to South Africa, because they were a very good team. So that was a little bit damaging, I think, for all of them. So it puts a little bit more pressure on. Yeah, I think Steve is what you get. He's very, very, he's a Cumbrian from northern England. So he has that dour sort of image, which he can be. But
he isn't very animated, is he?
No, he's not. He's not. That's what he is. Yeah. It's interesting, the Ireland one though, because I think if the players respect Easterby, they'll understand. They should understand. Everyone's talking about Andy Farrell not being there. Without even saying it, they should be like, "Hey, we can win with let's." If they're unsuccessful, that everyone's going to point at the coach. So the players should be thinking, "Hang on, we all rally around him, and we win this thing." Without Andy Farrell. I think that could be a thing for Ireland to focus, because you're talking about what have they got to sort of focus, a little bit of an edge, give yourself an edge that's what the All Blacks are always good at. They'll always find something, an edge somewhere. You've done this to annoy us, you've done that to annoy us. You just need that. So maybe for Ireland, it's like, hey, we can win this without Andy Farrell. Everyone's talking about him not being there. We're all here, and we'll win the game. So that is interesting. I think England have got Ireland, then France. That we could, very easily, the top two teams. I mean, the Six Nations is pretty clear at the moment. The top two teams are Ireland and France, and have been for a number of years. You've got Scotland and England trying to beat one of those guys. I think England win one of those games and all the rest of them. That would be, people would probably see that as a decent season. But to lose the first two games, and that would be tough.
Will there be calls from people for Borthwick to go?
Well, the media will always be speculating on that. I mean, that's just the way the world is now. That's just an endless speculation, isn't it, of everyone getting dropped.
Do you think he'd be in actual danger?
It depends on the nature of the season, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. But he's not guaranteed. He's not safe as
well. If it's horrendous, no one's guaranteed. You can never say never, but there's winning, there's losing and losing.
Okay.
Isn't it? I mean, you lose in a fantastic game, that can happen. You're getting well beaten. That gives it a different perspective. That's the same for anyone, isn't it?
Yeah.
The same for anyone.
Feels he's not teetering, but he's less.
That's the nature, even more so than my time, isn't it? The nature of, you have endless speculation coming. You have to trawl through all the crap really in life to what's the actual situation. In the England job, at any level, there's endless speculation and debate and all the rest of it. You have to deal with that. I think we're getting some good young players through. We haven't done that enough for a long, long time.
Okay. He named his team early. What does that usually signal?
God knows. Read into it what you will.
Okay.
And all that sort of naming your team late, not naming, it's all a bit of bluster before the game. Ultimately, I think as a player, the great thing is, it kicks off when it kicks off at 3 o'clock, whatever time kickoff is, and all the rest. When I was playing, when you experience, Eddie Jones was about, whoever, Clive, they'd all try and engage in these war of words, and half the players don't absolutely give a toss.
Yeah.
You're training, you're getting ready for the game. They're in their own world, and they're doing their thing. Even that stuff pre-game, when we're shouting and screaming, when I do that with England, I know full well half of them aren't listening to a word of it, because they don't, and that's fine. They're in their own world, getting ready for the game. Richard Hill's not listening to me doing all that before the game. He's in his, but they're. Most of them, they're doing their own thing, and that's fine if you're getting ready to play the game.
Most of the backs aren't listening to that at all. David Humphreys, you say to me, if you don't mind, I'm going to sit over here. That's okay. Simon Gagan would fly in and headbutt you in the middle of it because he was mad. And actually, Scott Gibbs would always come in. So we were 8 forwards, but we'd have 9 because Gibbsy kind of liked the rough stuff. So it was
that's made me think that first changing room in Cape Town was sort of like a U shape. So the backs were in here and the forwards were in here. And I remember Jerry saying after the game, they were sat, because they were around the corner. So you're giving it all that one. We're going berserk. We're amped up. Jerry's around the corner, just giggling to himself at what we're saying and doing at that point, because they didn't do it. He just went out and played. He said after the game, I was in stitches. So, guys have different ways of preparing. Going back to that, all that sort of, we love it in our media. Eddie's saying this or Clive saying that. Often the players, it's just white noise to them.
Can I ask?
Not always.
Did you care what was said in the press about you?
About me?
Yeah, as a player or as a coach.
When it's all negative, it's difficult, because that does stick with you. You can't say you completely ignore it, because that becomes the media vibe is something you have to deal with. So it's not great. And we had it, that England team in 2003. particularly at the World Cup, there was always the Australian media are very, very smart, and they've got to be careful when they go out this year. The Australian media are very patriotic, and they will do a job on the opposition team. Now, they'll get into their own team if they lose and they don't perform, but before it all kicks off, they will get into you and they'll try and do a job. They did a job on Carlos Spencer and the All Blacks in the semi-final in 2003. They did a real hatchet job on them. Unfortunately, we'd been out in 2001, so a lot of our guys had been through it and experienced it, which was fortunate, because the difficult thing with that is, and our media will never admit it, our media pick up on it and they throw it back at you. And you're saying, they'll throw it back to you. And you're going, well, guys, that's just what the Aussies are saying. Why are you that's just hype and crap, basically. But it's a story for them. So you have to deal with it again. So yeah, it just becomes a negative vibe around the team, which you don't need. And it does stick with you.
Sinead, speaking of media, and like guilty as charged, but for Prendergast and Crowley, an aspect of what they're juggling at the moment is the circus and the talk, and every game is almost a referendum and who's going to start. Rory got an early word on the team, and so it seems Prendergast for Saturday is going to keep his place. How do you think this is all playing out? How do you think they're handling the attention? Do you think it's going to be like a Humphreys O'Gara thing for like years on end, or will
Bring
someone...
it, I hope it is.
Well.
I absolutely love this. I love the fact that Andy Farr, like you were mentioning earlier about bringing through players, that he did that in November and gave it to Prendergast, and I thought, I was thinking, because we had to do our predictions, and I did go for Jack Crowley to start this game, because I did think he performed really well against Northampton. But love the fact, again, that they have just stuck with Prendergast, and I hope Prendergast is in his bed just counting down the hours to Saturday kickoff, and I think he will. And obviously there is a massive step up, like 2 Six Nations. He, got his test runs there in November, but I think he'll be loving it. I really do. And we've seen the effect, the way Crowley performed against Northampton. Like, he showed some moxie in that game, and that's what we wanted to see. We wanted to see that in him, even though he performed very well when he came on in the game against Australia. So I think this is great. I mean, usually we're kind of focusing on, the 10 against 10, let's say Marcus Smith. Now it's all about kind of Ireland and who the selection was. So yeah, I think you do hope it will bring out the best in them. Yeah, and I think Prendergast is going to be loving this on Saturday.
Because they have so far showed, like, especially for their ages, Rory, like an incredible mental resilience, pressure, scrutiny, off the tee, general play. How's he going to go? How's he going to respond? It was interesting reading Sexton's book, and he remembers O'Driscoll coming up to him early on in his Ireland career saying, "Be the Leinster Johnny." And he said, "I can't. I don't even know. Is it me? Is it him? Rog? I can't be myself." And he was making the point for a 10, decision-making position, you need a certain security of tenure. You make a mistake, you don't want to be looking over going, God, is the other guy warming up? You need to sort of feel like the alpha. Like, sorry, I keep taking a negative slant on everything. We're winning, it's terrible. But is there a kind of world where this becomes counterproductive, do you think?
Well, I think Keith and Martin both played with iconic 10s who had that surety of position, and you knew going into your week that, Johnny Wilkinson, Ronan O'Gara, before him David Humphreys were starting. And I think there is a strong argument that Sexton makes it in his book, and Ian Madigan has made it on our show, a strong argument for identifying your 10 and going with them. I don't think Ireland are in that position yet because the players are so young and they are all largely showing promise, and none of them are the finished article. Crowley had a go with it. It went very well. I think it dipped a little bit, and he's lost his place to a player that Ireland see as having incredible potential. And I think that was difficult for Crowley, but we saw in the Australia game that even if he's not starting, and even if he has to deal with being that secondary figure, he has a massive role to play, and they now have a 1-2 punch. And I think England have that too with Finn Smith and Marcus Smith. I think they're doing it the wrong way around, personally. I would start with Finn Smith for the control and have the Marcus Smith either a fullback or 10 to come on and bring pace and aggression into the game in the way they attack, particularly if they're chasing it. Whereas Crowley's a very different player to Prendergast. He's a better defender. He carries the ball to the line much more aggressively. He can play 12, he can play 15. He's a wonderful bench option. And I think if we keep looking at it as negative and getting down on it, we're losing the bigger picture of the fact that you have two excellent out-halves, plus Kieran Frawley, who dropped a goal to beat the box in the summer, and having been reliant on one increasingly old out-half for the last 10 years, you're now in an incredibly strong position. And it's Prendergast now. It could be Crowley by November. You know, they're going to be, maybe they get it for a campaign and they try someone else the next time. Maybe Prendergast loses form. He will get injured, obviously. They both will. But it's an incredible position of strength, and there's other options out there as well.
Do we know what relations are like between the two of them? Are they in the back of the bus not talking to each other?
They're pretty good, but I don't think it's quite Sexton O'Gara, and nor should it be. I think, and again, I don't think Farrell would tolerate that. We saw Jalabert go home during the French camp, and I think that was just he didn't want to be 24th man. And Galtier, it wasn't a blowout. He just said, look, if you need to be the main man and you come back next time. I don't think Farrell's going to do that, but I don't think it is at that level. And like they're all telling us they're getting on great, but I believe training's pretty spicy, but that's good as well.
I think having that competition, you need competition. You talked about surety of position. Those guys got that by performance, didn't they? They played. That you knew they'd go and do it. You're exactly right. To have two fantastic players in the position and let them fight it out, and they've got to understand that. And that's part of it, you know. It's got to make you better. It's part of the mental battle. You know, if you can't win that fight, well, you're good enough to play. So I think it is a massive positive.
Keith, you were the first person I ever heard mention Sam Prendergast.
Really?
Yeah.
I went down. I watched one of the Irish 20 matches against France, and he caught Bale Barry from behind. And he has a really bad running style, Prendergast. He's kind of looks, I don't know, a little bit uncomfortable when he's running. But he's unbelievably quick. And what I loved about that, how he played, he made a load of mistakes in the first. I mean, it was quite interesting. And I watched all those 20s matches. And one of the matches in particular, he made 15 mistakes in the first half. And he was truly astounding in the second half. So to be able to put all that rubbish behind him and then give a match-winning performance in the second half showed something that's pretty extraordinary. We talk about mental strength all the time. I think we get caught up a bit too much between the Leinster-Munster thing, and that rivalry plays over into people's idea. God, it's been disrespectful to Crowley. He definitely had a dip. And I think he's been stunning for Munster and for Ireland. I feel he has carried and had to carry nearly Munster on his own. I think that's a fairly hard pressure for him. Prendergast gets a chance, plays well. Do you drop him because you want to give somebody else an even? It's not even, it's not fair. It's not about fairness. It's about playing for Ireland, and that's different. It's nothing to do with Leinster, nothing to do with Munster. And so it's about getting that idea of it. I love the idea, like Sinead said, I love the idea of having two guys vying for it. I think that it's moved on past O'Gara and Sexton. I think we're at a group of guys that have trained from like 12 or 13 years of age with a dream of being a professional rugby player. They've gone into winning setups and a winning setup with Ireland. I want them there for 10 or 12 years each. I'd be really happy with that.
Okay.
You know, I want to see then someone come along and try and knock them off the perch, because that's what you want. We have trying to eke the most out of our best players in the last 10 or 15 years at World Cups. And I think they've been past their best. So I want guys that have got enough of game time. And if we just ended up with Crowley playing all the matches and Prendergast coming off to play 10 or 15 minutes, I don't think that's doing Ireland the right level of service to try and break that duck.
And I guess you're not doing as much punditry, so I haven't heard you on this. Do you see one or the other as more likely to play the majority of minutes over the next 5 years, or too early to tell?
No, I think it's too early to tell. And I also think we have to move a small bit away. I mentioned South Africa earlier on, and it's loath to give them too much credit, but what they've actually done in the last few years, like Rassie has thrown up an entirely different idea of different players playing in different positions, of chopping and changing. Nobody knows what the first team is. The players don't even seem to be upset, even if they're not in the 23. they all seem, it's building a squad of 30 players to go and win, and they have fully targeted peaking for the World Cup. Now, Ireland don't do that, and they kind of have to manage the resources differently. But we have to stop getting totally bogged down in the idea who's starting 10. And we have to get to the idea of who's going to be the guy who's going to finish out the game and win it for us. Okay. And their mentality has to be the same. And I think that that's a very tough one to get. And I wouldn't have liked it, by the way. But I do think we need to get to the idea that the purpose is for Ireland to win, not to be to who is less pissed off than the other. You know, and actually I think South Africa seem to have done that unbelievably well.
No, it's a good point. To crudely sum it up, the English number 10, Marcus Smith, gets the nod again. I saw Courtney Laws, amongst others, saying Marcus Smith's a glorious individual talent, but I would go for Finn Smith, better for the team. What say you?
Well, we were talking this week, and I think we all thought Marcus would start just with because he has more experience. But I felt for him when he came in, because there's this expectation that he's going to get the ball and suddenly he's going to go through and create magic. That's not Test rugby. You know, that's not even rugby. Your 10's mainly facilitating everyone else to play. And so it had this ridiculous pressure on him that he was going to touch the ball and every time magic things were going to happen. Where mainly Test rugby is you're facilitating, you're grinding, you're going forward. So I think he actually handled that pretty well. I don't think he overplayed when he came in initially into Test rugby. But you should be a better player when you've been in there 2 or 3 years. You've got to start maturing and being able to be, you have to be a different type of player on given days, because you never know what the game's going to be like, conditions, all those things can change. And you need to improve and become, you know, when you're playing, you get into international rugby and you think you just want to survive and do a decent job when you first play. Then you're getting picked again. Okay, I'm now not, you know, a first-year player. And then you're getting better and better. You've got to improve. And you've got to understand, you've got to go, right, I can do this, but I need to get better. I need to get better at this and this and this to be a world-class player. And we haven't had enough guys who've come in and had a start who have then gone on to be world-class players for various reasons, not always their fault or for whatever, but we need more of that to happen, because you know, Ireland are in that position now with very, very experienced players, and guys are coming in. And I came into a very experienced England team that was probably a little bit over the hill, but they were hugely, hugely experienced, so it made it easy for me. You know, we've had too many guys coming into teams in flux. It's difficult, because no one really knows what they're doing. No one really can believe in each other that much because they've not done it. So we need those guys to establish themselves and have competition. You know, we need competition for places as well. You need 2, 3 top-class players, ideally. You never really get that, but that would be ideal. So I thought he'd start, and it's a big game for him, because if it goes, like we talked about with Steve and the whole team, if it goes badly in the first couple of games, then there's a demand for change, isn't there? You always have to be seen to make a change, to do something. It's very difficult to keep that same team in those circumstances.
Sinead, what does your head tell you about Saturday?
I've no idea. I think we've all got like 2019 in the back of our head and what happened then. I think I'm going to go with Ireland. I do expect them to be far better than what they showed in November. I do hope there'll be less errors, better line out, definitely more cohesion. It is going to be interesting to see, you know, that you've spoken about, like, how the Leinster play will affect the Ireland play as well. It would be interesting to see how that goes. Yeah, I'm going to go for an Ireland win, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of pundits we've had on the show, Rory, over the last couple of weeks are saying rugby has changed and you're now better off without the ball. And that Nina Barr's Leinster approach will actually, you know, Ian Madigan was on, he said he thinks Ireland will look at that and say that is the way the game is going. Because we've looked at Ireland over the last couple of years and it's Sexton pulling strings, lots of possession, lots of phases, nice patterns, and there's a sense the game has shifted, and that's a big shift for Ireland.
Yeah, and I don't think they coped particularly well with it in November. You know, the other thing about being that top tier team for the last couple of years is that teams are coming with strategies, and you know, 2 coaches I think have found ways to undermine Ireland more than anyone, and that's Steve Borthwick with the assistance of Felix Jones and Twickenham last year, and Joe Schmidt twice, once with Australia, once with New Zealand. And England turned Ireland's strengths into weaknesses at Twickenham last year. And I think anyone who's kind of floating into this game thinking Ireland are going to show up and win, or on the back of England's poor November, is sorely mistaken. The fact that England have picked such a small back row when Ireland's line-out is vulnerable, I think is an interesting one. There's obviously a strategy there. They're obviously going to try and disrupt Ireland with the breakdown. They're obviously going after them on the ground. But I think Ireland are vulnerable in the air as well. And it sounds like Ryan Baird is going to start in the Irish back row. They've gone with a lighter second row of Ty Byrne and James Ryan. So they're going for they're targeting the air themselves. I think they made 21 errors against New Zealand, 28 errors against Australia. If they can get that error count down, get their line out, there won't be under as much pressure in the line-out because England have fewer options to throw up against them. They know that it's Itoje or George Martin. If they just have to avoid those two when they're probably going to win the ball back. So it simplifies things for them. They are still capable of adapting to the way the game is being played, but it will take a bit of adjusting. I think they need to play closer to the ruck rather than play wide. If they go wide, they'll get turned over, especially with three fetchers in the England team. That's just a no-brainer, I think, and they have good kick chase options as well. So maybe their strengths need to change, but they have excellent players. They've got an informed Josh van der Fleer, informed Caelan Doris, they've informed players across the pitch. So they just got to, they've got to pick their own game strategy and kind of impose that on England rather than let Borthwick this time dictate the game to them.
Keith, will Ireland embrace Jacques Nienaber Leinster defence?
Bits of it, I think, but not all of it. I don't think it's very hard to be very easy to stop Ringrose flying out of the line and smashing somebody. His timing for that has been extraordinary, and I often wonder whether he's big enough to be able to take it and whether he'll be able. But that's been extraordinary. It's been a highlight this year watching Leinster play. If Dan Sheehan gets picked,
it's Kelleher.
I
think it's Kelleher to start with Sheehan off the bench.
Yeah, our line-out has been poor. I do agree we have additional height over England, so I think that makes it interesting. I think it's a really unusual English pick, and for that, over kind of a variety of other things, and I know that they will target, and they absolutely will. I would still be taking the view this is Ireland at home. Nobody is taking a win in the Aviva. That's not allowed to happen. That has to be the attitude. What are Ireland going to do to make certain that happens? And so I think you'll end up with a high level of composure, a lot of kicking.
Right.
And like to see, to the level of performance that we get to, because I think we were a little bit undercooked at the start, like playing New Zealand at the very start of the autumn. I think knocked our confidence a little. And that's kind of unusual because we haven't shown any lack of confidence for a while. So the performances afterwards were winning, and that's really good because we weren't playing very well. So I think we'll be a lot more prepared now, a lot sharper now. We need to win our possession and hold on to it. The non-shepherding law has changed things a lot. It's been interesting, Freddie Stewart coming back in. Mm-hmm. He's known to kind of catch pretty much everything. But I don't think Ireland will make a presumption that he's going to catch everything. And because you have an opportunity to rush guys up to jump unhindered in the air against him, I think they'll test that selection as well.
So it's going to be a very interesting game for all of those reasons. We're kind of coming out of time. I'm sensing you think Ireland to win on Saturday. What about the championship?
Ireland to win a tight game on Saturday. I think it is. We have Ireland and France at home. I think we have the best chance for the championship.
Okay. Sinead, you had Ireland on Saturday. What about the championship then?
I've gone for France.
Okay.
Yeah.
To win in Dublin and that be the one.
Yeah, I think so. With Dupont back, he's a game changer.
Yeah. Rory, Saturday and championship?
Yeah, I got Ireland for both because the schedule allows it. I think if it was France and Paris, it would be a different matter. They're obviously an excellent team, but I think the beat England and Scotland was the massive banana skin, but without Tuipulotu and Cummings, they're not the team that have the strength to dictate it to Ireland. So then you've got 4 weeks effectively to prepare for France, and you build a game plan and you implement it, and then you go to Rome to win a slam. I mean, it all opens up from there. Obviously, Steve Bortwick comes and undermines it all on Saturday, then you're looking at a very different championship. But the way the schedule is allowed, I think they've got a really good chance.
Okay. Martin Johnson in Dublin.
What? I mean, someone asked me on the plane over, what about Saturday? I said, they said, are you going to win? And I said, well, the odds are probably not, because Ireland are very strong. But that's the joy of it, isn't it? So I'm going to pick England, obviously. I did pick France for the title. I just think, Dupont back, maybe, they'll just have a little bit more edge for it. But Ireland and France are the best two teams in this tournament until anyone else proves otherwise. That's the rest of the teams to disprove that and try and get up to their level. But that's the joy of playing, isn't it? That's why you let the guys play. We don't decide; they do. So first games are always exciting. Everyone's full of excitement and nerves and angst. So that could go anywhere. That could result in performance, or it could result in mistakes. You never know. Hopefully, it's a fantastic game and we nick it.
Yes, okay. We've done over 2 hours. I don't want to keep everybody all night, and I can sense the room would probably take more rugby chat, but it's a school night, and we might leave it there. Again, thank you all so much for coming. We all really appreciate it. We're kind of blown away by the response. A big thank you to our panel, to Rory, to Sinead, and of course, special thanks. They've been out here for well over 2 hours holding court. The best of friends, Martin Johnson, Keith Wood. Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you.